This is our weekly live chat with everyone who follows on social media. Um, I have some exciting news. Our podcast, our first episode of the podcast is actually live. So if you go to our YouTube channel, um, you can actually download and listen to our first podcast, our first podcast episode. We're also gonna be downloading it to Spotify and all of the podcasting services very soon. So I will post the logins maybe in a newsletter or a some sort of. I will share all of the logins and all of that stuff to you guys to log in and download all the episodes from all of the podcasting services. So I'm very excited about that. The first episode actually talks about my journey to the United States. When I came here at 18 years old, I went through college, did a lot of things that um, a lot of things that a lot of our immigrants in the United States have to go through. It hasn't been um, easy journey. It's been 25 years, but at the end of it, thank God I'm actually in a very good place, and we're I'm blessed by having a very good practice that everyone envies. Um, I have a bunch of questions today, and I will go through as many of them as I can. If you do have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I would be more than happy to answer them for you in the next episode when we meet next Wednesday. I do have a lot of policy questions this time. I don't have a lot of questions regarding cases and how to deal with cases and stuff like that. But if you do have any questions, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to answer them next time. Um, as you know, there are a lot of changes coming to the United States. We have an election coming up in 150 days, and if we if we get a change in the administration, if President Trump becomes elected again, things are gonna get really drastic, and I think a lot of the policies that happened when uh, he was in he was in office from 2016 until 2020. It was a very stressful time for a lot of immigrants and a lot of immigration attorneys because they were placing people that didn't really have um, a reason to be in removal proceedings other than the administration being harsh on people who are out of status. So if you're voting, I'm going to post a longer video on TikTok. If you're voting and you're an immigrant and you're trying to vote, please vote your conscience and vote for the person who's going to help immigrants like yourself stay here in the country. And we would like to see a continuation of the present administration and the administration guidelines when it comes to prosecutorial discretions and application processing and all of that stuff that are very good and they're helping immigrants become permanent residents and citizens very quickly, and they're trying to work on backlogs and everything. So if you're an immigrant and you came here to the United States and you had to struggle like myself and want to keep immigrants in the United States, please vote for the Harris ticket if she gets the nomination, or the Democratic ticket, because we desperately need to fix our broken immigration system. Again, I'm going to post a bigger and longer video on this on socials very soon. But if you do have any questions, or if you want to know how to vote or anything like that, I'll be more than happy to help. Um, that little spiel relates to a couple of the questions that we got this week. First question is, how do changes in U.S. foreign policy affect immigration policies and procedures? Um, this is actually a very interesting question, and it gets into more of the politics and the policy of immigration, instead of dealing with benefits applications or things like that. The reason why I say it's a very interesting question is, um, and I've said this on my podcast, and when I was interviewed on other people's podcasts, I've said this before, is that one of the problems in the United States immigration system is that we don't have a long-term policy for immigration. Our nation doesn't have a long-term plan to what kind of immigrants we actually want here in the United States. And I say that as a person who's been here in the United States, and I promise you, I received a lot of advantages when it came to our immigration system. Um, I pretty much went through every single step, but our immigration system, it took me 17 and a half years for me to get my green card, and almost 23 years for me to become a citizen. And I'm an immigration citizen myself. I mean, immigration attorney myself. If you think that is a long time, it absolutely is a long time, because the system doesn't prioritize people who are educated. The system right now is very heavily weighted in favor of family petitions and reunifications of families and all of that stuff. Uh, and the problem that we have is we don't have a way to attract high level talent to come here to the United States, and for people to stay here in the country. I spoke to someone yesterday who's on top of her class in medical school, went to a top-notch medical school. She's working in Miami at one of the most premium residencies that you can think of, and she can't get a green card for at least 12 years because she is from India. Because our system right now is very backlogged because of the per country quotas that we have on the system. So the system doesn't allow people with certain backgrounds to come here, and unfortunately, when it comes to Indian students and Chinese students, they come here to the United States, they study, they do everything correct, and then they go through the H-1B system, and then unfortunately, at the end of the day, they have to wait a very long time. At some point, some Indian preferences actually, it's taken 150 years for someone to become a permanent resident. And as someone that we educated here in the United States, that is one of the biggest issues that we have, is that we're losing high level talent, immigrant talent in the United States, because unfortunately immigration has become very politicized. The question says, what are the changes in foreign policy affect immigration policies and procedures? And one part of the issue that I mentioned earlier is that immigration is very politicized. So with the changes of administrations, we see changes in policies. And unfortunately, again, it causes doesn't relate to a long-term immigration goal. Every single when we have an administration that's more isolationist, we become more isolationist and more restrictive when it comes to immigration. For example, Mr. Trump, when he was president, limited people from coming here from Muslim countries, for example, what's called the Muslim ban. That affected our international relations with Arabic countries, because we weren't allowing their people here. They stopped actually retaliating and not allowing United States citizens to go to some of the Arabic countries. So um, isolationism, and unfortunately, leads to less immigrants in the United States, and that's a huge deal, when it comes to immigration policy. For example, our relationship right now with Mexico is very good. They're helping us limit the amount of people who are crossing the border. That's why the Biden administration actually worked out a deal with Mexico where they can stop irregular crossings into our southern border, and they're working very good on it, and they're actually limiting the amount of people that are crossing through Mexico to the U.S. border. Unfortunately, from 2016 until 2020, when Mexico was supposed to build the wall and pay for it, that wasn't that wasn't the uh, that wasn't the issue, and we didn't actually have a good relationship with Mexico, and Mexico let everybody come in. So we didn't work with Mexico to stop the flow of undocumented immigration or illegal border crossings, because the administrations actually did not work well together, and because of that, the United States, had a lot of trouble when the Trump administration was in power at the southern border. So our international relations really affect our immigration policy, but in the long term, and one of the things that I want to tell Congress to work on is a long-term system that actually is very flexible, that allows people, regardless of the type of administration that we have in Washington, regardless of Congress, pass a law that actually meets the immigration goals of the United States and is not connected to politics, and it's not changed by politics as much as we have it right now. I think that's one of the biggest issues that we have. The The next question I have is, what are the potential long-term implications of temporary immigration statuses in individuals and families? And that's another policy question. And for example, I've represented people all the way from 1957, when we literally they still had green cards, and the person came through Ellis Island and stayed here, and I was able to defend him in removal proceedings and won his case. Um, Coming here to the United States and having a very long presence in the United States is a very good thing. Having children in the United States is a very good thing. Um, Having children in the United States is not a guarantee that you're going to be able to stay in the United States, and I've had those cases before. However, if you're here in the United States, buy a house, pay taxes, even if you work in an undocumented way, you can still file taxes. If you work with a work permit, make sure that you file your taxes. Do things volunteer in the United States. Volunteer with organizations that helps migrants, immigrants, all of that stuff. If you are in the United States for a long term, and you have been doing things the right way, you establish roots in the United States, and you make sure that when it comes time to apply for your green card, you will be able to use all of these things to your advantage. So even if you end up in removal proceedings, you'll be able to get your green card. But just having a long-term residence in the United States without any roots in the United States is just not going to be enough. Um, Again, the benefit is, if you're on TPS, for example, and you've been here for 10 years. I know people who've been here for 30 years on TPS, when some of the Liberians that we represent. Um, that's actually a very good thing, because you can stay in the country and you can never be deported, and you work and you pay taxes and you can retire at the end and get Social Security and all of that stuff. That but as I said, just being here in the United States for a very long time, unfortunately, doesn't give you any benefits when it comes to immigration status. So make sure that if you are here in the United States, make sure that you're actually doing things the right way. Don't get arrested. Um, don't get arrested. Don't do anything. Obey the law. And if you're a long-term resident of the United States, you should be okay. Um, being in the United States, and you should be okay, and that should help you get legalized down the road if we have a change in the law, or you can apply for a green card down the road. The third question is, what are the ethical considerations for immigration lawyers when dealing with clients facing deportation? The number one ethical obligation that I have for my clients is the duty to zealously represent my client. And zealously means it's doing everything humanly possible to make sure that your client is getting the best representation that they could get. The second obligation that you have is to the immigration court. And unfortunately, I have seen a lot of people go to immigration court and not be nice to the immigration judge that holds their fate if they're staying in the United States or not. I've seen lawyers do it. Thirdly, you have an obligation to be truthful to all tribunals. So if you have a client who you know is lying, you need to rectify the problem. Number four is do not apply for what's called any frivolous applications. If you know that your client does not qualify for certain relief in court, and you go ahead and apply for that relief anyways without having a good faith basis, you are going to have a big issue. And if you keep doing it, you will get reported to the bar, and you will get removed as an attorney from being able to go in front of the Executive Office of Immigration Review, and you will get disbarred from that bar. So these are some of the obligations that you have, but I think the biggest obligation that I spoke about was the first obligation, is that you have to do everything humanly possible to make your client win their case. Now, I know there are cases that you actually that you lose, and not everybody wins every single case. I wish I could say, but I've lost many cases, I mean, I've won many, many, many cases compared to the ones I've lost. Literally, the ones I've lost, I can count on one hand in 15 years. So if you are in removal proceedings, this is the last advice that I would give you. Please don't go cheap. Please, please, please make sure that you speak to someone who's reputable, who's gonna do it. I know it's expensive, but fighting for your American dream is worth it. And I know it's expensive to hire a good attorney, but hire a good attorney. And there are a lot of ways to hire a good attorney. I know the money, we almost always come up with the money, but there are ways to work with a good attorney to actually get represented by a good attorney. Please don't go for cheap. Please don't go for someone who with a bad reputation, because again, you need someone to protect you in immigration court, and sometimes going cheap or going with someone who has a bad reputation is not a good thing. The next question I have is, how can immigrants best protect their rights and interests in the face of potential changes in immigration laws? Uh, those questions are awesome. So can it get informed, get informed. Immigration, and unfortunately, immigration law is civil in nature, is not criminal. Okay, so you have a lesser bundle of rights depending on what kind of immigration status that you have, and I will speak about this in a second. And I spoke about this in last week um I spoke to you guys live. So the bundle of rights that you have gets bigger with the better status that you get. So if you're undocumented, if you cross the border without inspection, you do have the right to due process. You don't have the right to an attorney. If you are a permanent resident, you get a bigger bundle of rights. saying that you have you can't get deported, for example, or turned back from coming back to the United States, even if you've been outside the United States for 10 years as a green card holder. They can't turn you back at the port of entry, and an immigration judge has to prove that you have to prove that um, you actually kept your a green card, but the immigration judge has to make the determination whether you actually still have your green card or not. So they can't remove you from the United States if you're a permanent resident. So you get a bigger bundle of right. And then, of course, when you naturalize, you you become a naturalized citizen. You have the full rights of of American citizens. You can vote and do everything that you that you can do as an American citizen. Vote, run for office, all of that stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of immigrants, and this is something that the Bar Association hasn't done a good job with, is when it comes to immigrants, we don't do enough know your rights um, kind of classes for people to know what they can and cannot do. And that's really unfortunate. But if you, for example, the ILRC has a class on what are your rights under immigration law. Can you get stopped? Can you get stopped? Do you have to tell someone that you're not a documented immigrant in the United States? So if you go on their website, a they do have a class for that. Take it. It's a couple hours, and you'll know what your rights are. Don't ever admit to anything. You do have the right to remain silent. You don't have to tell them everything. They can ask you questions, and ICE can ask you questions, and you don't have to answer them. Um, Now, when it comes to the Fourth Amendment, unfortunately, again, because it's a civil procedure. Immigration is a civil procedure. Unfortunately, that when it comes to Fourth Amendment protections, we don't get, immigrants don't get as many Fourth Amendment protections as non as U.S. citizens. So that might, when it comes to immigration. Now, I'm not talking about criminally. You do have that right, but if you're in immigration proceedings, for example, and ICE knocks on your door or stops you and they search your car, you cannot use that Fourth Amendment violation to dismiss your case. Now, there are agree I've used it and I've gotten cases dismissed before, I promise, but you can't use the Fourth Amendment to suppress evidence, for example, unless it's an egregious violation of Fourth Amendment. And egregious violation is actually a very high burden for you to prove in removal proceedings. That's why it's very hard to use them. So you do the right to due process. Again, you cannot get deported from the United States without going through process. Now, there is something called expedited removal, which I believe violates due process rights. But no one can just put you on a bus and deport you out of the United States if you are in the United States and you're not an applicant for admission. So if you're in the United States, you've been admitted, they have to put you in removal proceedings before they remove you. It's not like in other countries. So you have a lot of rights as a citizen, as a non-citizen. So make sure you know them, Google them, and make sure that you actually get the as much as you could to know what you can and cannot do as an immigrant. Unfortunately, guys, I do have a 3 o'clock that I have to go to. Again, I'm gonna post a video later about what's at stake this in this election cycle. I'm gonna post it maybe later today or tomorrow. Um, Let me know if you need anything. The number is 888-963-7326. Give me a call, and if I can help with anything, I'll be more than happy to help. Take care, guys, and I will see you next week.